This is your first fish.
I got one.
Father's Day, a day to say thanks to the most important guy in the world. This year, get him what he really wants at Cabela's Father's Day sale. Get 20% off Cabela's Reels and Fly Reels, 25% off Sig Sauer Elite Performance Ammunition, and earn $25 in Cabela's bucks when you spend $150 or more in store. Come to Cabela's Father's Day sale, in store and online at Cabela's.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Best-selling and award-winning author of true crime and crime fiction, Yvonne Mason is back with a brand new book, The Pink Canary, a book that delves into the life of a drag queen and a marvelous whodunit. You can find this and all of Yvonne's other works on Amazon.com or find Yvonne Mason on Facebook and Twitter.
You're gonna kill me.
Buy your copy of Pink Canary now.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you're not crazy. You haven't gone insane yet. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is Off the Chain, and I am your host, Yvonne Mason. My guest, God love her, graciously agreed to allow me to push this show back an hour tonight so that we could go and celebrate my husband's 82nd birthday and take him out to dinner, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And, of course, that was a piece of shameless promotion by my ad man, Chris Dunham. If you're looking for an ad, someone to do your ads, contact him off of my Facebook page because, as you can tell, he does great ads. And, of course, that was the Pink Canary. If you love all things Key West and you love all things drag queen, you'll absolutely fall in love with the murder mystery, because it is set in Key West, and it is Fall Down Funny. A very good friend of mine who I hooked up with when I started researching this book was a premier drag queen in New York and in Canada, and I have to give a huge shout out to Vicki Lane because I could not have done this book right without her. She immersed me into the culture of drag queens, how they think, how they talk, how they walk, how they act, how they interact, the do's and the don'ts, the etiquette. And without her, the book would have not been believable. And I also have to give a shout out to one of my best friends in the world who I absolutely adore with all of my heart. And his name is Peter Fundura. He is Penelope in the book. He is the comic relief in The Pink Canary. And when I wrote the book, and told Peter that I was putting him in it because he is insanely funny on his own, and I just drew from some of the stories he had told me to put in the book. He told me that he had always said he would have to die in a plane crash in order to become famous, but he didn't have to die in a plane crash anymore because I had made him famous in The Pink Canary. So if you love a good comedy, you love a good murder mystery, and you just love the interaction of people in general, get The Pink Canary because you will not regret it. And I want to do this ad for a new sponsor of ours. Her name is Diane Moat, and she has a great new children's adventure to tell you about. Pepper Neely Pet Sits Magical Animals. In the first of the series, The Supernatural Pet Sitter, The Magic Thief, someone begins stealing the magic from Pepper's animal friends. She has to find the magic thief before the magic thief finds her. The Supernatural Pet Sitter by Diane Moat is available on Amazon as an ebook or paperback. So plan ahead so that you can entertain the children on a long car trip or a rainy summer day. Again, that's The Natural Pet Sitter on Amazon by author Diane Moat. Go get that today. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to place an ad on my show, you can go to advertisecast.com, look up Off the Chain. The pricing is there. I guarantee you it is not out of anyone's price range. I'm very reasonable. I don't believe in gouging. I believe in paying it forward. Send me an email from offthechainradio@yahoo.com, and we'll take care of you. Now, most of you have followed me on this show, and it will soon be a year. since day one, and I appreciate that very, very much. When I ran the numbers on the show this morning, just the show, we were 8,909 listeners. Last night we had 235 listeners, just last night. I'm honored. I am almost without words at the dedication and the support that this show has received from listeners, especially from our friends from down under, because you guys beat out the USA 2-1, and I appreciate you so, so much. Overall, including all the podcasts this show goes up on after it goes into archives, we are well over 20,000 listeners and 65 countries plus. Countries I didn't even know existed. So my guests are getting out there, and that is the important thing. They are getting exposure into things in places that they probably would never have had the opportunity if it were not for this show. And it's very humbling to see the following they get on this show and to see them succeed because of this show. And I want to thank them for that, because I have them call me now or send me emails and say, Vaughn, when have you got a slot? Vaughn, when have you got a slot? I want to come back. And I got a new book coming out, or I got this to say. We need to have a slot. And because of that, ladies and gentlemen, we are booked up to the end of the year. We are taking slots for the first quarter of next year. So if you have a book, if you have music, if you have art, if you have a business, if you have a platform, or if you just want to chat for an hour, contact me at offthechainradio@yahoo.com. We'll get you on here, I promise. And with that being said, I have a brand new guest tonight, and I can promise you this will not be her last time. She is author Jane Gordon, who was born in Essex, England, and grew up exploring the history and culture of London and the surrounding counties. In the 1990s, Jane immigrated to Detroit, USA, eventually settling in Southwest Florida. Jane returned to England after a 15-year absence to spend 6 years in the southwest of England, living on Exmoor. Here, she was inspired by the atmosphere, the beautiful scenery, and the ancient history of the place. And this is where Jane began her writing journey. And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot wait to talk to her about that. I told her before the show I was so envious of her, just to be able to walk in some of the places in England where there were battles fought and history was made and kings and queens roamed. It's amazing. She writes in the dark romance genre, and she has 4 published novels. Jane also writes short stories and being a trained horticulturist, Jane occasionally writes for a Florida gardening magazine. Jane returned to Florida in 2013, and I'm so glad she did, and now lives on the West Coast in Sarasota. Jane, thank you so much, my dear, for letting me push the show back an hour and for coming on the show.
Thank you, Yvonne. I am thrilled to be here. One point, my name is Jane Jordan, not Jane Gordon.
Did I say Gordon? I didn't mean to say. I meant to say Jordan. I am so sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It's Jordan.
That's fine.
This time of night,
I make the point.
Thank you. This time of night, I go brain stupid.
Oh, I know. I know. I've been there myself.
So thank you for straightening that out. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Jordan with a J, not Jane Gordon with a G. Y'all that know me know sometimes I can't even pronounce my own name right. So, Jane, I humbly apologize.
No problem, Yvonne.
Thank you so much. Well, let's start out with your history, your being born in Essex, England, and you didn't start writing until you went back. Where were you headed in your life before you took this writing journey?
Well, I guess I grew up in Essex, which is in the southeast of England. And when I grew up, I lived in a very rural place with fields and woods and old graveyards to play in. And like many places in England, Essex folklore is full of old ghost stories, which fascinated me from a very early age. And I guess I always wanted to write a story, but, life takes over and, different jobs and obviously emigrating to a different country. And I sort of, I got married, had a couple of children, was living in America. And it was only when I went back to England and I stayed on Exmoor that I stayed in this old house that really was haunted. And I had a couple of really strange experiences there. And it just got me thinking about a story. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I have to write this story, otherwise it's just going to send me insane. And so it developed from there. I mean, I started writing in 2004, and that one book, which was my first book, it developed into 3 and became a trilogy. And I just haven't stopped, I guess. And obviously, I've had to take breaks in between because I moved countries twice. And then obviously came back to Florida, and so, but it sort of kept me sane, if that makes any sense. Writing keeps me sane.
Yes, that's I say writing keeps me from going writing keeps me from going crazy, which keeps me from going insane.
Absolutely, definitely.
So now you've ran up the antenna there when you were talking about the old house you lived in and it being haunted. Do tell us more.
Okay, it wasn't actually a house I lived in that started me off on this journey. It was a house we rented. We would go back to England once every year or every couple of years while we were still living in America. And we rented this house for a week, and it was on Exmoor. It was on a really remote part of Exmoor. And as we were driving down this overgrown lane that, basically we were thinking, is this the right place? Are we, this can't be a real road because our car is being brushed by hedgerows on either side. And the road sort of opened up into just this magical place, and this house was actually built on the foundations of a 1,000-year-old building. And as I got to speak to the caretaker towards the end of the trip, I found out more and more sort of information about the house. But I've always been slightly susceptible. I can walk into a house and think, something weird's gone on here, or, I just have a feeling. I sometimes get chills walking into old places. And I walked into this place and didn't particularly feel that way. I mean, it was a very, very old house, and it had been, it obviously had some remodeling done, but the actual bones of the house were as it was, centuries ago. And the first night, I went upstairs to the bedroom. I sat down in front of the dressing table and the mirror, and there was a closet door behind me, and all of a sudden this door swung open, and of course I was really scared because it was like there was no reason for this door just to open, And I ran downstairs and I said to my husband, do you think this is haunted? And he said, oh no, don't be stupid, you're just imagining things. And I thought, okay, it's probably not, it's just me. But over the course of the week, several really strange things happened, like the pantry door, a really heavy pantry door, kept opening by itself, and it had mice in it. I kept finding mouse drop-ins, and so I decided just to wash the china that we wanted to use and not use the pantry because I didn't really want mice running over the china we were using. And so I said to everyone, just keep the door shut, don't open it. But every time I walked into the kitchen, the pantry door would be standing open. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, why can't anyone just keep the door shut? Anyway, towards the end of the week, I met with the caretaker, and he didn't, and it was literally almost the last night we were going to be there. And he said casually in conversation, is everything all right? Have you, any problem in the house? And I sort of said, no, it's been fine. And he said, no doors opening by themselves or anything. And I said, why do you say that? And he told me the story of apparently the house was haunted by this little girl who would like to play tricks on people, and she would open the doors, and she would open closet doors and pantry doors, and she could often be seen in the master bedroom staring at a wall, which apparently years ago it used to have a window, but then it was bricked up. And I tell you, that last night I could not sleep at all. I was so paranoid that I would see this little girl, standing by my bed or something. But that really gave me the inspiration, I guess, for my first book, Raven's Deep.
That is fascinating.
It was. And also, the other thing that I think really fueled that first story was because it was very countrified, this place, there was a church. I kept seeing a sign to a church, in England you have these really old wooden signs, and they say a name of a church and how many miles away they are. Excuse me. And I kept seeing this sign and thinking, we really should walk down to this church, but it was like through woods and through fields and everything. And we did in the end. We walked to it. And when we got there, we realized that it's actually famous for being the tiniest church in England, but it has no road to it. It's literally through the woods, and that obviously fueled my story, because I thought, wow, a hidden church in the woods that you can't get to by road. This is just too good to be true to write about. And so my story sort of developed from the house and the church sort of thing.
Why in the world was there a teeny tiny church in the middle of the forest?
Well, years ago, this hamlet was it was basically just a tiny little hamlet, and before there were roads, they would ride horses through there. That was how they actually got around. But this particular hamlet became a leprosy colony, and they say that because of the leprosy at that time, I guess it never really developed into a bigger village, and so it sort of died out. And even today, there's very few houses around there. I mean, there's a few, and there's a few more roads in. But Exmoor is one of those places that it's almost like time has stood still in certain places, and I think places like that are just magical and special, and I think that's what inspired me really to start writing.
See, ladies and gentlemen, I knew I would learn something. I knew about Exmoor, but I did not know the history behind it. When y'all planned your holiday to go to Exmoor, were you aware that it was this remote hamlet that time forgot?
I was aware that Exmoor is actually a national park, but it's one of the least visited national parks. I was aware it was remote, but not quite as remote as what I wasn't expecting. I mean, there are towns around and that, but we chose to stay in a place that wasn't really close to a town. The nearest village, big village, was about 4 miles away. So, once you get out of a small village and then you're just in the countryside, there's lots and lots of little hamlets around and that. And some of them you just think, wow, I've just taken a step back in time,
Wow. I just put that on my bucket list.
Oh, definitely. You have to visit one day. I mean, it is dramatic.
Because people don't think of places like Exmoor. People think of London and Whitechapel and the bigger cities, and they lose the ambiance and the uniqueness of the history of England. by not doing that.
They do, and that's what people, whenever anyone goes to England, they always think of London, and London is an amazing city. I mean, of course, I'm going to say it's one of the best cities in the world. I mean, it just is. It is fascinating, and I delved into hidden aspects of London in my second book, but there is so much more to England than London. There is so many other places, villages, cities, and everywhere you go has so much legend and folklore and that sort of thing. I've always liked to include local folklore or legend into my stories, and local people are always willing to share their knowledge, and they give great insight to a place, especially if you're writing about historical buildings or cities. I spent time working at an old castle on Exmoor when I lived back there, and the castle, it was just amazing to sort of hear the history from the people that had worked there and lived there, and stories of the family. And of course the castle was haunted as well. Everything's haunted in England.
Of course.
But I met people that swore they saw ghosts and grey ladies and all sorts. There's always a grey lady somewhere, in a castle.
Well, I know when I get ready to write another novel out of England, ladies and gentlemen, I know who I'm getting in contact with for information. Miss Jane Jordan here, because she's going to be my new best friend.
Oh, absolutely. I have a wealth of information.
And I can't wait to nab it from you, because I've been writing for a long, long time. And one of the things that I teach people that want to write is, A, start out writing what you know, and B, when you're writing a story that is not local to you, in other words, if you live in Detroit, that's local to you. But if you write a story and it's out of England, do your homework first, because you're not just writing for people in the United States, you're writing for people that live in other countries, and you have to be historically correct or you're not credible.
That's right. I found I was really concerned about that when I wrote The Beekeeper's Daughter. In fact, all my books, because all my books are a bit, I do go into history with. Even my first book, I wrote about vampire superstition, and I wanted everything I wrote about to be factual, of what we know to be factual, what the legends sort of tell us, and that sort of thing, from around the world, not just from England. But with The Beekeeper's Daughter, I started it off with a witch trial, and to me, that had to be factual of what would have happened, how they would have behaved, sort of thing. So I actually researched witch trials of 16th century, and I found harrowing documents of accounts of actual witch trials. And also there was a fantastic museum down in Cornwall in England, and I visited that, and it has one of the most extensive collection of witch artifacts and documents and all sorts of stuff, throughout Europe. So that was a real insight. It was quite harrowing, actually, as well. It was, to see that. I mean, we all know that most of these women, mainly women, I mean, they did accuse men as well, but mainly women were just innocent women, and they were just accused by their husbands who wanted to get rid of them, or their neighbours who didn't like them, and, the hysteria at that time just meant that you could be accused of being a witch and executed, so it was eye-opening,
And while we're on The Beekeeper's Daughter, I found it interesting in doing my research that you used bees as her familiar, and I'm thinking, how and why?
Because I wanted her to have a connection with bees, because it is really important for the story and how the story unfolds, and especially at the end, she has to have that connection. But I've always been really fascinated by bee charmers. There are such people, they do exist, the people that can really charm bees. And I don't mean in a magical way, I mean in a way that they can literally put their hand in a hive, or they can be covered in bees and they don't get stung. Maybe they don't emit like fear pheromone or something. I don't know what their ability really is. I mean, it appears magical when someone can do that, but I think there's probably a very logical reason why some people just do not get stung by bees. And I loved the idea of a bee charmer, and I thought, we always think as a witch of having a cat or a bat or something like that as a familiar, but bees are actually the perfect witch's familiar, because they are wonderful, they're very in tune with nature, and yet they have a dark side to them, obviously, because they can sting, and in some cases, someone's highly allergic to a bee sting, they can kill them. So, it just fitted for my story.
I can't wait to read it. I'm going to tell you, I'm sitting here going, okay, no, y'all cannot go and get her books now. You've got to wait till the end of the show. Sorry about that. Now, your dark romance, for those that, for whatever reason, have been living under a rock or under a bus or a bridge and go, what is dark romance? No, it's not dark chocolate, people. It's dark romance. Explain to them what dark romance is.
Okay. For me, it means a captivating romantic story that is dangerous, seductive, gothic tension. I like the gothic feeling of a dark romance. I always think of, if I had to say what's a dark romance that you'd all know, probably Wuthering Heights. It's quite dark and it's seductive and it's got that gothic sort of tension. But for me, I mean, it should be tragic or uplifting, but it sort of has to explore a darker side of human nature, if you like. So I guess with an emphasis on emotion. I mean, even though I write romance, there's always an element of supernatural and horror. And, one thing somebody once said to me about my first book, Raven's Deep, was that it's very romantic and the horror just creeps up on you. And I thought, yeah, it really does, because, when by the time someone's read my book and think, I don't like horror, why am I reading this? It's too late. They're already entrenched in the story and they've got to finish it. So I guess that is what I think dark romance means to me.
You are an evil woman.
I know.
So you get my...
I hate to categorize my books too much, because if you say, oh, it's dark romance, someone will say, oh, I don't like romance. And it's like, yeah, but if you say horror, then people will say, I don't like horror. But my books cross over. They cross over horror, romance, supernatural, even a little bit of sci-fi in, something I write. So, and maybe fantasy. I mean, vampires... What is that? It's horror. Of course, it's horror, but it can be fantasy. It can be very romantic as well.
Well, when you were thinking Wuthering Heights, and I was thinking the old television series that I used to hurry home from school to watch, which was Dark Shadows with Barnabas.
Right. I don't know that so much. I have heard of it in recent years because there was a movie out, but I don't know the TV series. So
it starts out, Barnabas lives in an old house set in England, and he's lived there for centuries, and everybody thinks that he's his father's son and grandson and great-grandson because, of course, he never ages. And as the story goes on, he has a picture of this beautiful woman that hangs on his wall, and at some point in one of his many lives, that was the woman he loved. Her name was Angelique. Well, this woman comes to be his housekeeper, or she's there for some reason, and her name is Samantha, but she has this uncanny resemblance to Angelique. I mean, she could be a doppelganger. So the whole premise of the story is Barnabas Collins is trying to find a way to make Samantha fall in love with him because he really believes she's Angelique, and it gets twisted and convoluted. And when I'm reading about you and Raven's Deep and Blood and Ashes, and I'm going, I see dark shadows in my life again.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, it's sort of strange because when I started writing Raven's Deep, it wasn't going to be about vampires. It was just, I started off with a ghost story. And as I started writing it, it just became more and more, I don't know, I kept thinking, a ghost is just not enough. I need something else. I need something darker. I need another level to this. And when I sort of found the vampire I wanted to write about, because I conjured him up, he was out of my head. And it was like, okay, but if I'm going to write about this, then it's got to be right. It can't be stupid. It has to be real, as real as it can be. And I thought, okay, in a modern, because obviously that book is set in modern times, and I thought, okay, how would a vampire really, really exist on Exmoor? And I had to come up with this whole scenario of how he would exist and why he would exist. And then when I went to my second book, Blood and Ashes, and I carried on, and then I explored the London Underground, and I was absolutely fascinated. I mean, I knew that there was the London Underground, and there were deep level shelters in the London Underground. I mean, lots of people have seen the James Bond movies where they're right in the London Underground, and they've got their secret MI6 rooms or whatever. But that's really true. During the Second World War, Winston Churchill had emergency war cabinet rooms down there. But they go beyond that. There's ghost stations down there, stations that are not used and they're abandoned, and there's spiral staircases that go down to even deeper level shelters. And I thought, wow, of course, it would be a perfect place for a vampire to be, because it's dark, it's underground, and it's huge, and it goes all under London. And this is, but in researching that, I found out so much about just London, and people, I'm sure most Londoners haven't a clue that it's all beneath their feet. I mean, and that sort of thing really fascinates me. I think, we just get on with our lives and we really don't know what's actually going on around us.
See, there you go again. No, ladies and gentlemen, y'all cannot go get these two books because we have another one to discuss. And you're just going to have to wait. Like, I got to wait until we get off the show here and go buy her books. You've got me hooked now, Jane. I hate when that happens. So, Raven's Deep starts out as a ghost story, correct?
It started out as a ghost story when I was writing it, and it became a love story with, and obviously there's a young girl, an aspiring writer, who goes down to Exmoor to stay in an old house, and obviously she falls in love, but the person she falls in love with is a vampire. But when I wrote this back in 2004, and this was before Twilight, it was before True Blood, any of those vampire-type romances. So, I I found myself in 2006 sitting in a top London literary agent's office because I was trying to obviously get an agent interested in my book. And she'd sent me a letter and she said, I love your story. I think it's got great potential. And she invited me to go up to London to meet with her. So I did, thinking, oh my goodness, this is amazing, a literary agent. And she sat there and we got on really well. And she said, here's the problem. She said, I can't compare your book to anything else on the market. Vampires are just not in. And I don't think I can sell this to a publisher. I love the story. I think it's got potential, but I just don't know of a publisher that will buy this. And so, I found myself trying to defend my story and say, but, Anne Rice was the last person that really had a great hit with a vampire story, and that was 10 years ago at that time. And that's the reason the market was so ripe for it. And she said, but, she kept saying, I don't know, vampires are just not in right now. And ultimately, she turned me down, and I was so gutted. And so when, I think it was Twilight first, when Twilight hit the headlines, literally, and it was months later, it was 6 months later, I was devastated because I thought, I knew it. I knew this could have sold, and it could have been a big thing. And here it is, a few months later, and now I'm just another author that's writing about a vampire romance when I'd already written this months and months ago, and she just wouldn't take a chance on me. So yeah, that was a bit frustrating.
She apparently did not know how to jump out of her comfort zone, because
that's very true. Yes, that is very true.
For her to say that vampires don't sell, vampires have been selling for since the first vampire book came out by Bram Stoker centuries ago.
I don't think she was saying that they don't sell. I just think she didn't want to. I think the real problem, she couldn't compare my work to anything on the market. And unfortunately, I think that's how it tends to be in the literary world. They want to compare you. They want to pigeonhole you. They want to say, who do you think you're like? And it's like, but I'm not like anyone. I'm like myself.
Exactly.
I am Jane Jordan, And it's like, do I really have to compare myself to another author all the time? Why can't I be stand alone from any other author? And they don't like that. Though. They want to say, oh, because there's something on the market right now, you're like this, so therefore we can sell it. And at that time, there was nothing like me, so she turned me down. And
Jane, that's what is so sad. I don't mean to interrupt, but you hit on a very important point. In us as independent authors, we don't have to be compared to anyone else. That's what makes us so unique.
Absolutely. I have read some great stories by authors that have self-published or, not been published even. And you think most people won't ever read these stories because there's no agent or publisher that will take a chance on them. And, it's a sad fact. I started off self-publishing, but I did get a publishing contract for The Big Keeper's Daughter. But if I had never self-published, I don't think I would have, because I think for some authors it's the only way to break into the market. And, self-publishing is a bit of a double-edged sword because the trouble is now the market is so saturated with self-published authors, and anybody can publish any rubbish, quite frankly.
Well,
and so it becomes harder to find good stuff amongst the bad stuff, as it were.
But then on the flip side of that, for centuries, publishing companies have told us what to read, just like this agent.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know how to market this, so because I don't know how to market it, I don't know how to push it. Well, this is what you do, lady. You go to Joe Blow's publishing house and you say, look, do you want to get in on the cusp of something great? Read this. She didn't even want to take a chance. And
no, I think. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think
no,
that's
go right ahead.
The problem. She was a top literary agent, and it was. I guess she probably had easier authors that she could easily sell to a publishing company by comparing them and saying, this author I've got is just like this author who is selling, therefore we should give them a publishing contract. But when an author comes along that they can't compare anything to, then it's like, which publisher is going to want to take a chance? And, that is my feeling on it. I think that is unfortunately what is going on there.
Well, all I'm going to say, it's their loss.
Oh, I agree, totally. Totally their loss.
Now, you have, before we get too far down the road here, I want to mention the book Memoir of Carl. Tell our audience about that one.
Okay, that is the last book in the trilogy. In the first two books, my two main characters are called Darius and Madeline. And A Memoir of Carl is told from another person's point of view, but it's sort of something happens in the second book that brings it all together. So even though it's told from a different point of view, it all becomes clear about a quarter of a way through the third book in A Memoir of Carl. I really, really wanted to write about Scotland because I'm half Scottish, and I have memories very long time ago when I was a child of being in Scotland. My father grew up living under the shadow of Stirling Castle, and I've been to Stirling Castle. And the stories that I remember him telling me, they just stuck with me, and I really wanted to write about them. I also wanted to write about a ballerina. Many years ago, I had a friend who was a dancer, and I always remember her telling me some of the awful things that ballerinas go through because there is so much emphasis put on their weight, or there used to be, of how, they can't gain too much weight. They have to go to weigh-ins where they're literally weighed all the time, and they can't gain an ounce, or if they do gain an ounce, it's a really big deal. And I always remember my friend telling me that one of the dancers she was working with at the time had been taken to hospital because she'd been eating toilet tissue. And the reason she was eating toilet tissue is because it puts bulk, but it doesn't add calories, which it's an awful thing. I mean, it's just, wow, how can someone do that? But, such is the life of a ballerina, and they don't want to gain weight. And because so much emphasis used to be put on it, and your career was on the line for gaining, like I said, a couple of ounces, they used to do all sorts of weird and strange and horrible things to not do that, not gain weight. So I really wanted to write about ballerina. I really wanted to write about Scotland, and of course the vampire in the third one falls in love with a ballerina, and it was just a beautiful love story, and I really wanted to write about that.
Now, don't laugh, Jane.
Okay.
Don't laugh. But I have just spent the last 7-8 months doing background on Scotland because
really?
I started.
Wow.
Yes, I started a trilogy that takes place in Cawdor Castle in the Highlands and Whitechapel, and then it goes back to Edinburgh. So now I have another resource to come to, and it takes place in the year 1888, 1889. So now I have a new, yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have a new resource for Scotland. I'm so excited.
You
this
do.
is
Actually,
marvelous.
I have Scottish cousins, and one of them in particular was really helpful in just giving me information about my own family, about what used to happen in my own family. Because I really didn't know my Scottish grandmother that well. She died when I was quite young. And and I just wanted to get the history of how they used to live and everything. And she told me, I always knew that my grandmother was, I guess she would have been clairvoyant. She had these abilities. She used to read the tea leaves all the time. And, they used to, I guess back in the 30s and 40s, they didn't really have televisions and stuff like that. They were quite poor, and they used to go to seances all the time. Of a weekend, that was their entertainment. They would go to a seance and those sort of things. So my cousin telling me all this stuff was like just fascinating. It was like, wow, they really did this, So I sort of delved into that more, and it just became really interesting. And in fact, reading tea leaves, I have a segment in the book about reading tea leaves. And my dad used to read tea leaves, and I always used to, when I was a child, I always used to get him to read the tea leaves for me. So it's just quite funny when I think about it now.
Ladies and this is why I do not do a scripted show, ladies and gentlemen, because when I do a show, it's scripted, and this is a perfect example of why I don't do a scripted show. Not only have I gained a new friend that lived in England, she's half Scottish, doing a book full of Scottish, and it's funny how things work out.
That's true.
Very funny. So now that we've come full circle, what are you working on now?
Okay, I am currently finishing my 5th novel. I also write for a Florida gardening magazine, and I've just been asked to write a column for a local nursery that want to do things online. So I'm juggling those things as well. But my 5th novel, all my other stories have basically been set in England. I wanted to make the transition from England to America. And so I basically decided to write starting off in Dartmoor, which is another moor. It's very close to, it's actually next to Exmoor. And it's where, I guess your readers would know Dartmoor from Sherlock Holmes, The Hound of the Baskervilles. That was set on Dartmoor. Well, I really wanted to incorporate the legend of the wished hounds, which are hounds that literally roam across Dartmoor. And they're supposedly hounds that have been put a spell on by a witch. That's how the legend started. But I wanted the legend because I thought the legend is just great. So I wanted to incorporate that. I wanted to write about Dartmoor because Dartmoor is amazing. It's very austere, if you like. It's full of granite outcrops and not as. It's quite dramatic, but it's full of like mires and quicksand, and lots of people over the centuries, I guess, have found themselves stuck in those mires, and some people have even been sucked down and died. So it's got this real sinister undertone to it. So I wanted to write about Dartmoor. I then wanted to move it to New Orleans. So it's a story that spans 20 years or so, and it's a mixture of Dartmoor legend and voodoo of the Deep South with a darkly romantic thriller weaving throughout it. So it's really complicated. I like to set myself lots of challenges when I write.
I can't wait. When is it going to be finished?
I'm sort of still. I've pretty much finished the whole story. I'm just in the stages of editing and re-editing. Just going through it and making sure everything is right and it's all coming together right. Because I think when you write in 2 different countries and you also write in different time periods, because it basically goes forwards and then backwards. You just have to make sure that everything completely gels and that you haven't got some date wrong, or So I'm just making sure everything's perfect, or as perfect as it can be.
So would you come back in January and we can really talk about it?
Absolutely.
Sweet.
Yes, that would be good.
Because I can't wait to read that one either. This woman has got me hooked.
This one hasn't been published yet, so this one's still in the manuscript stage.
So I'm going to put you down for January, because by then it should be published and at least out there a little bit, so we can really delve into the who, what, when, where, and how. Right.
Well, I hope so. I am trying to, find an agent. I mean, still, backwards and forwards with this stuff, but who knows?
And we didn't even get into being a horticulturist. We'll just save that for the next time, too, because that in itself is an amazing ability. My husband says, I ignore plants so they die. My thing's about as brown as the dirt in the yard.
Well, I guess growing up in England, I mean, it's a country full of gardeners. So, I just grew up with people have gardens. And, coming to America, it seems, well, I mean, there are people that do garden here, but lots more people don't. And I think it's not because they probably don't want to. It's probably because they just don't know how. No one's actually showed them, or they don't really understand it in the way that I understand it, because I grew up in a place where everyone has a garden, everyone grows plants, everyone plants seeds,
So, ladies and gentlemen, we will learn something new when Miss Jane comes on again. Now, you're not going to believe this, Jane, but our hour is almost up.
Really? Wow. That's gone so fast.
It does. So before we run out of time, tell the folks where you can be found and the names of your books again, so as soon as we get off air, they can run over to Amazon and start buying them.
Okay, the names of my first three books was Raven's Deep, Blood and Ashes, and A Memoir of Carl. And my fourth book, which has been recently published, is The Beekeeper's Daughter. And they're all available at Amazon.
And where can you be found?
I can be found, my website is janejordannovelist.com.
And you're also on Facebook, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I am on Facebook.
Because we want people to keep up with you on Facebook, because they will come back to hear what we have to say about this new book. And you had me at Dartmouth and New Orleans. I mean, two of my favorite places.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, New Orleans is a fascinating place to write about, and I loved the whole voodoo thing, and I went into like the history of voodoo, and it just was absolutely fascinating. And I've been to New Orleans, so I just thought I have to write about this place. Yeah.
There's nothing like it.
No, not at all. It's very unique.
Because New Orleans has more than one culture. You have French.
Does,
you have
yes.
Yeah, you have the French, you have the Spanish, you have the Creole, you have the African culture, you have the Germans are there, you have the Cajuns, and they're all blended into this melting pot, and they all have mixed and mingled their religions and their environments and their cultures together, and it is one of the most amazing places in the world.
It is, yes. I mean, I haven't been there for years. I went there, it must have been a good 15 years ago, before Katrina, so I'm not really sure what happened after that. If it's still the same, but I would imagine it is. I think especially the French Quarter is probably still the same. But it left an impression, and certain places just do. I recently went to I say recently, a couple of years ago, I went to St. Augustine, and that was another place that I thought, wow, I could write something about this place, because it's just got that it's got something about it that draws you in, I think.
It has its own heartbeat.
It does, yes. Perfect explanation, yes. Its own heartbeat.
And so does New Orleans. And the heartbeat becomes your heartbeat when you're there, and when you leave, you bring a piece of that heartbeat with you.
Yeah, that's very true. And lots of places are like that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people as well. And I often base, characters on people I've met. Sort of just something about some people, and you think, wow, you'd make a great character. I might have to change a few things, but you'd make a great character.
Yeah, I have done that a time or two. Killed off a few people, too, that I wasn't real fond of, but yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, just know that we as authors, if you piss us off, we'll kill you off in a book at some point. It's just what we do.
That's what we do as writers.
You heard it first, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Jane Jordan, and yes, it is Jordan, not Gordon. Miss Jane Jordan will come back and visit with us in January. And Jane, when the show goes off, please do not hang up, because I have some things I need to tell you. But before time gets away, I wanted to say thank you again so much for A, letting me push the show back an hour, and B, for coming on and spending an hour with me and giving me all of this information. I don't know what to do with it now. I mean, I know what to do with it, but I'm overwhelmed with it, and I love it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Yvonne. It's been great, and I cannot believe an hour's gone past already. I've had a great time talking to you, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's been my pleasure, because I'm going to tell you, Exmoor and I'm going to go look up Exmoor now. Look at all the stuff.
Well, you must.
Yes, and then I'll pick your brain about Scotland, because this book is going to be the death of me. I'm telling you, the characters won't shut up.
Yeah. So, I often think that with books.
So, ladies and gentlemen, on Wednesday night, we start our week over anew, and I think my first guest on Wednesday night is author Fran Ornstein. I have known her for many, many years. She and I started in this indie author trip together when indie authors were frowned upon, and we have broken the glass ceiling all to pieces. There is no glass ceiling anymore because we shattered it. There was a band of us. There were about 12 of us. And when they told us we couldn't, we said, don't believe me? Just watch. So for all of those that told us no, thank you. We appreciate it, because look at us now. And then Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night, I have a brain cramp. I can't remember. It's been one of those days. But you all know that when I leave the show, that I leave you all with this, and that is, we are all dreamers. And if you didn't have dreamers, we wouldn't have this wonderful world that we live in. We wouldn't have astronauts. We wouldn't have books. We wouldn't have music. We wouldn't have online radio shows. We wouldn't even have hieroglyphics. So if you have a dream, ladies and gentlemen, and if your child has a dream, I don't care what that dream is, if he wants to be a sanitation worker, if he wants to be a school guard crossing, whatever that child wants to be, remember that child is our future, and his dream is worthwhile. Do not discount his dream. Yes, the dream may change, but while he's dreaming that dream, help him achieve it, because not to have tried is to have failed, and failure is never, ever an option. You also know that I also say this: if you want to achieve success, don't even ask permission, just go out and do it. And don't just feel special, be special. And then I leave you with this: your smile is your logo. Your personality is indeed your business card. And how you leave others feeling after having an experience with you, ladies and gentlemen, trust me when I say that does indeed become your trademark. Because we never know the impact that we leave on another human being when we walk away from them. We can either make their day or we can ruin their life, because we don't know what other people are going through, because we have never walked in their shoes. So keep all those things in mind. Encourage your children to dream. Encourage your children to live those dreams. Encourage your children to be our future. And know that without those children, and for every child we lose a piece of our future, a piece of the tapestry of our life that we can never get back. So until Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, yes, we will be going back to our regularly scheduled program at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time with my guest friend Ornstein. Join us then. And once again, my guest, Jane Jordan, and I, thank you for being with us. This is Yvonne Mason. This is Off the Chain. And we say good night until Wednesday. Okay, Jane, we're off the air, but what I wanted to let you know is when we get off the phone, the show will automatically go up into archives. When it archives, I will put the link up on my Facebook page and tag you in it. And then you can take that link everywhere so people that didn't get to listen tonight can listen whenever they want to. And then tomorrow, I will put this show up on podcast.com, Podcast Garden, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and Spreaker. And I will also put those links up for you because between those 5 podcasts and iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, FM.com, and YouTube, which this show automatically goes up on, this is where we get the 65-plus countries because each podcast has its own geographic of listeners.
Okay, that's interesting. Wow.
It is very interesting, and this is my gift to all of my guests. You take all those podcasts plus this show, put them on your Facebook page, put them on your website, share it with everybody so that you get all the exposure that you possibly can.
Okay. Well, thank you, Yvonne.
You're welcome, and I will set you up for January. I'll send you a couple of dates and see what's good for you. And again, thank you, my dear. I have so much enjoyed this show.
So have I. It was great, actually. It was. You're never sure, if you're going to run out of something to say. But like I said, that hour went so fast. I couldn't believe it when you said that the hour was up.
I almost did. And we could have talked all night just about the history of England and Scotland. Yeah. We could have.
Definitely.
And see, this is what I tell.
Where are you actually located?
I am in Port St. Lucie, Florida. I'm on the East Coast, but we do come to Sarasota occasionally for meetings.
Okay, I wasn't really sure where you were. I wasn't sure if you were down in Key West or something. But you're on,
no,
okay.
Key West is just one of my favorite cities. I just love Key West. I would go back to. If you've never been to Key West, you should go to Key West.
I have. I went there years and years ago, so I don't really know it that well. I visited.
Go back.
Once.
Go back. You'll be writing a book about it because there's a lot of dark stuff in Key West too.
Okay, that's interesting to know.
It has a heartbeat too.
Okay, yeah, like I said, it was years ago since I've been there, so I don't really remember too much about it.
Well, you need to go. But I will not take up any more of your time. And again, thank you so much, my dear, for coming on the show. I so appreciate it, and I learned a lot, an awful lot.
Well, thank you so much, Yvonne. Really great to talk to you. I really enjoyed it, and you have a great evening, and go and enjoy your husband's birthday with him.
And we will talk again soon, my friend, I promise.
I'm sure. Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Good night.
All right, good night.
Racetrack was raised in the South, where the 4 seasons are summer, Sodapalooza, and summer. Down here, the weather's always as hot as our coffee, and that's real hot. That's why our soda, tea, and frozen drinks are real cold, and our refills are real free.
Stop by Racetrack and get your Sodapalooza cup for just $11.99. Or download the Racetrack app to get $2 off. While supplies last. Offer ends 7/31.
Hello.
Hello.
I got 2 free smartphones when I switched to Metro PCS.
One for him and one for me.
It's not for you. It's for people like me.
And parrots.
I knew I should have gotten a dog.
Get 2 free Samsung Galaxy J3 Prime smartphones when you switch 2 lines to Metro PCS and enjoy a 4G LTE network that's more reliable than ever before. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network or active on Metro PCS in past 90 days. See store for details, terms, and conditions.